My name is SophieShepherd. I'm a senior designer at HappyCog, and I work out of the Austin office. And in the Austin office, we have 7 people. We also have a Philadelphia office with, I think, 18 people. And we do entirely client work. We make websites for clients, and we have a ton of different types of clients. We do a lot of higher ed work. We do ice cream companies, beer companies, pizza companies. We do law offices. We're doing like an organization for economics right now. So we work with a lot of different types of people. And as part of our job, we have to get to know all of these different types of people and learn a lot about different businesses. Since there are 26 people, I think, just about everyone at the company ends up talking to clients on a regular basis. We all work on small teams, so I work with usually about the same 5 or 6 other people. And since we are on these small teams, the designers are talking to clients, the developers are talking to clients. We do have project managers who help kind of keep the projects on course, but for the most part, we're presenting our work directly to the clients. Before I was at HappyCog, I was a freelancer. That's not me, and I never worked in a hammock, but it was nice. So same thing there, I was working directly with clients without a project manager, so I was doing a lot of keeping things on track. And before that, I worked for a company that was a consultancy for digital publishing. So we worked with a lot of large publishing companies in New York to talk to them about how they can get all of their content on the web. And this was 2008. This was my first real office job. And same thing there, we were working with clients. So other than a few retail jobs and nannying jobs that I had before any of this, I've always been in client services. And I think that client services gets kind of a bad rap. It sounds bad. The word client literally sounds just like an annoying person, and we all have clients that we complain about, and I think anyone who has worked with clients, whether it's in the web or tech, or if you're like a house painter or something, you're going to have war stories and terrible things to say about your clients. Services sounds kind of soul-sucking. It sounds like we are just servicing someone else and doing stuff for someone else. Literally, the first half of it is servant. But that's not really what we're doing. There are websites like Clients from Hell, and this was taken from quotes from Clients from Hell. And I chose these 2 because they are literally things that clients have said to me in the last year. Could you do an actual logo instead of a font, and that doesn't look premium? And I think it's really easy to take things that clients say and do and laugh at them. But I think that if you can change your perspective on working with clients, they're not always so terrible. So these are 3 reminders that are really easy to forget, but are important to remember while working with clients. And these are things you can make inspirational t-shirts out of them, put them on Post-its around your monitor, or make a Pinterest board, whatever works. The first one is clients support me. I work for a company that pays my bills, but clients are who pays their bills. And so really clients are allowing me to do this job. They pay a lot to use our services. I've never been on the other side, or never in my industry anyway, of hiring someone, but I know how much they pay for us, and it's a lot of money. As I was thinking about this, I kind of thought about my parents and that they supported me for so long, and now I have to support myself, and I know how much money that costs, and I never thought about it at the time. And it's kind of the same with clients. Until I'm a client hiring someone, I don't think you think about how much you're investing in them. But they allow me to do this job. It's kind of a cushy job. I work in a nice office with a shuffleboard table, and I could be working at a restaurant or a store. Clients like and need me. This is very self-helpy, I'm sorry. But they hired us for a reason. There are a lot of other companies that do the same stuff as us, but they saw something in us and thought, okay, that's where I'm going to put my money. And they hired us because they can't do it themselves. And the stuff we're giving them is valuable to them, and we're there for a reason. And this is really easy to forget about, like towards the end of a project when you're really bored and everyone's hating each other, but it's a good thing to remember. And ultimately, clients have the same goal as me. Generally, if you abstract everything you're arguing about with a client, it's kind of the same thing, and we all want to have a good website at the end of it, and we all want to have a smooth process and to be happy and to accomplish all our goals. And that's really easy to forget about, but I think if you have that in the back of your mind while you're debating things and talking about things, it makes it a lot easier to deal with. So you're probably thinking like, cool mantra, Sophie. Thanks for nothing. Like, these sound really good, but they're not going to make my life easier or my job easier. And it's true. I think no matter what, every project that we have, something always goes wrong. And there are a lot of things potentially that could go wrong. So before I move on, I have like some assumptions about you and your work. I think if any of these are not true, you have bigger things to deal with. So I'm assuming that you behave professionally, you're getting to meetings on time, you're treating people with respect, you're representing yourself and your company well. You're meeting deadlines. If you're like totally missing deadlines and you're like, man, my client sucks, you don't really have any right to complain about your client then. As long as you're holding up your end of the deal, everything should be fine. You're delivering your best work. This doesn't necessarily mean that the client thinks you're delivering your best work or you're delivering the best work for the client in their eyes. You know, there could be some misunderstanding, but as far as you're concerned, you're doing your best and you're putting in everything to the work. You're listening to the client. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean you're understanding the client, but you're trying your hardest to listen and move things forward. And in general, you're being a nice and reasonable person. So these are like clients 101, and I assume, well, humanity 101 really, like how to be a nice person and do your job. But assuming that you're doing all of these things, even then, things aren't necessarily going to go smoothly. And I found that with generally all client projects, of course there are things, sometimes things just go wrong, like the client runs out of money, or your main point person quits their job. Those things just happen, there's nothing you can do about it. But any other hiccups in client work, I find, is always because of communication. And I think it falls into one of these three buckets: vocabulary, so there's some misunderstanding in what you're talking about. Feedback, either you're not understanding the feedback right or your client is not giving you good feedback. And expectations, and this again goes both ways, either the client expecting something different or you're expecting something different from them and the project and the collaboration. So first, vocabulary. This is me. In November, I bought my first house, and as you can see by like the raw light bulb above my head and the cardboard floor and no trim, it's kind of a fixer-upper. And one of the first things we wanted to do was get new windows. These are the original windows to the house. You can see here I'm wearing a hat and a full jacket because in the winter there was no, like you could stand next to the window and it would feel like you were outside. So one of the first things we did was get windows, and I called a few window replacement guys to come by and give us a quote. And the first guy that came was walking around the house. He like measured all the windows, and he started talking about egress. And he was like, yeah, you know, I don't know about the egress of these windows, and we got to talk about the egress requirements and something about like getting city permits because of egress. I had no idea what he was talking about. I could just not know this word, but he was saying it with such authority and so casually that I was like, you know, I must have really missed something in school because, like, I don't know what he's talking about. And this guy doesn't seem like a super intellectual guy, but he's just using it like really casually. And I think my first mistake was not asking him what it was. But after he left, I took out my iPhone and searched it. And it means a path or opening for going out and exit. And it seems like it's used primarily by window salesmen and firefighters, and like not many other people use this word, or maybe like building code writers. But he used it so casually because he says it every day, and it means something very specific to him, but I had no idea what he was talking about. I think it's the same thing not only with the work that we do, but also the work that our clients do, because they work in really specific industries. So these are all some words of clients right now. I have coworkers in the front row laughing, that they use like really casually on the phone: cheese pull, pep count, Woody, and Waldo. If you have no context for these, you have no idea what they mean. So cheese pull and pep count, we have a pizza client, and they'll literally like in feedback be like, can you just add, we need a close up on the cheese pull. So that's, and then there's a pizza builder where you can order your pizza, and the pep count is very important because they're very proud of their pep count. Woody is the name of the Ben & Jerry's cow, and they refer to him as Woody, so we would get feedback like, can you just move, Woody's a little too big. At first, we had no idea what they were talking about. He's called Woody, fun fact, because the guy who painted him originally in one of the first Ben & Jerry's was named Woody, named the artist. He still owns the copyright and makes a ton of money because he painted a cow. Waldo, this is one of our clients right now is Lagunitas, and the Waldos are the teenagers who invented the term 420, and so anytime they refer to 420, they say Waldo. I'm very proud of this because it's the most stoner slide of any web conference. But the same thing goes for us, and we use all these words that to us seem really normal, but unless you're a web designer or working in a web office where we have conversations about this stuff every day, it kind of doesn't make any sense. I think to make matters more confusing is these words do have meaning elsewhere, but they mean different things to us. So if we're talking about performance with a client or accessibility, their understanding of that word is very different than ours. So even though they may not realize that they don't understand it in the way that we're talking about it. So same thing goes with all these crazy acronyms. I was explaining a project plan recently to a client, and so which means that like all of these individual acronym phases were, and I realized like I sound crazy, like I'm just saying letters to this person. So I try to always say these full things and explain words. Same thing goes for words where we have like a ton of words for the same thing. So these are all depending on what company you use, or even like what week it is and what the hot word to use for certain things are. These all mean the same thing, and that could be really confusing to a client, especially if they've worked with someone else who called it something different in the past. So tips for talking to clients: don't ever assume that they know anything. Like me and my egress window guy, they may not ask you because you're saying it in a way that's so comfortable. Or they may be like, oh, accessibility. I got it. I'll access it on my phone. And that's not really what we're talking about. We try to present everything, any deliverables, especially early deliverables, we present over the phone or in person if it's possible. And that gives us a chance to use our vocabulary and also insert explanations. And over-explain, even if they know what it is, it can't hurt to over-explain stuff. Don't use synonyms. So I did this recently, or I do it all the time, unfortunately, with mood boards. We started making mood boards as a deliverable. Then we realized mood boards, that's not really the right sound for it, because that could be a collage of things, and that's not what they are. So we started calling them style boards. But then we were so used to calling them mood boards that half of the time we called them style boards and half of the time we called them mood boards. And then we started calling them visual prototypes, and then that isn't quite right. So I think the important thing is that stick with whatever you're calling it. Same thing with wireframes. We call them wireframes, prototypes, HTML wireframes. And all these things mean different stuff. And share articles. It can never hurt to teach a client about stuff. I find that they actually really like kind of feeling in the know. The second piece of communication where things can go very wrong is feedback. Most designers are used to being in critique situations. A lot of us went to art school and we're taught to critique stuff, and it feels very natural to us. This is me at work. This is like if I was on planet Earth, this would be my natural habitat, with developers critiquing me and Greg Story sitting behind me telling me to make fonts smaller. It's natural to me. I don't mind being critiqued. I don't mind critiquing others. I know what to look for. I know how to talk about work, but clients don't necessarily know that. This is a quote from an article written by our previous VP of Design, Chris Castaller. He says, "No one is born a helpful critiquer. Don't assume that all stakeholders know how to be productive in a critique situation. Coach them. Make sure your first question isn't, well, what do you think?" And when I first read this article and this quote, I got kind of offended because I knew he was writing about me, because I did this on a client call once. We presented the full design. I felt really good about it. There was 10 seconds of silence, and then I said, well, what do you think? Do you have any questions? Do you have any feedback? And the client freaked out. She was like, I only just saw it. I don't know what to think. So we found that if you ask them really specific questions, that it's a lot easier for them to give feedback. And these are things that we not necessarily do on the phone, but we'll write these up and give it to the client with the deliverable, so that we're pointing to specific things that we want to hear their opinion on. And this makes clients feel a lot more comfortable. If you give them a piece, a page, they can be like, yeah, I like that, or no, it's not quite right. But unless you're guiding them, you're not going to get valuable information back. And things like this it makes our lives easier, because giving work and receiving feedback, that's kind of the main communication point from getting us to the beginning of the project to the end of the project, and making sure that the client's happy and that we're giving them what they want. And we can design a ton of stuff, but unless we're getting communication back, it's like that saying, if you have monkeys on typewriters, eventually they'll write Shakespeare. If we don't get feedback, that's, we could design an infinite amount of designs. Eventually we'll get it, but this makes it a lot easier. Some tips for feedback: explain what you need to move forward. The last one you saw on that last slide was, does this brand feel authentic? On Wednesday, before I came here, we had a client. He is the founder of the company, and he's done all of the graphic design for the company for the last 20 years. And then we're coming in and designing his website. And we're not going to move forward until this guy feels like this is good, and it represents him, and it represents the company, and it represents everything that he's poured his heart and soul into. That's important for us to move forward. Things like certain web fonts, if they want to change it a little bit, that doesn't matter really. We can wait until the next phase for that. But they need to know exactly what we need. Why, never how. I have another client right now, and I think she does it from a warm place in her heart, because she's trying to make our lives easier and give us less work. And she'll do stuff like say, can you just make that a little bigger? And here, I whipped up this idea for a logo. Maybe try this. And that doesn't give us any information to move forward with. It's a lot more helpful if she was like, this needs to have more emphasis, or I don't like this logo for these reasons. I would like it to be these things. And that's a lot more valuable for us. It gives us a lot more direction for the rest of the site, and it puts us in a less awkward situation, because if someone just tells you to do something, then we are going back to this servant services role, and that's kind of not fun for anyone. Request consolidated feedback. So this is a big one. These are different ways I've received feedback recently. One is in a Basecamp thread that isn't related to the feedback at all. So a client will just search their email and find something that I happen to be on, and then reply and be like, hey, Sophie, just by the way, can you change this stuff? This gets lost so easily. I see it, I think, oh yeah, not a big deal, it's so tiny. But if it's on a thread that has nothing to do, I'm never going to go back and look at that. This is a thing we've been getting, is PowerPoints. And the first time it happened, I was like, that's weird, I guess that guy really likes using PowerPoint. But then it happened with a completely separate client, and I think it's like a corporate client thing. I think they're really used to using PowerPoint and sending that. And what they would do is take screenshots of the work and then put like red writing that as a presentation over it. And this is an actual, I copied this name, I didn't make that up, like from a PowerPoint. So this was one guy, Dave, who is just one person in their greater team, sent me a PowerPoint. So if everyone on their team did that, I would end up with like 10 PowerPoints and probably quit. And the last one is Please Call Me. This is another one I had recently where one of the people on their team emailed me personally, probably because they knew I was a pushover, just saying like, please call me. And this does no one any favors because probably I'm going to forget half the stuff they say on the phone. But also the project manager isn't getting looped in on it, so she's not going to be able to police me to get it all done. So what we always do is ask for feedback consolidated in one document. We have someone on their side take all of the feedback from their whole team and put it together. This also helps when we have feedback from separate people. It's often like one person is like, can you change this to yellow? And then their boss is like, can you change this to red? And we'll probably go with the red because they're in charge, but then this person, I don't want to deal with someone else's internal politics. They need to figure that on their side and then give it to us. These are some ridiculous, in my opinion, ridiculous pieces of feedback we've received. It needs to be above the fold because people in the future do not scroll down. This was in the last round of design after we had done like a lot of UX thinking, deciding it's a one-page thing, we really don't need navigation. She said, I think, we do need navigation. We said, oh, well, we've already discussed, if you remember all of these times, we said we don't need it for these reasons. And she said, well, it's not navigation exactly, it's just like a list of links that you'll click on and it'll like take you to other places. And then this is a pretty common one. Can we add some more animation and background videos? Like New York Times snowfall. We get that like every other project. And I think it's really easy to laugh at all of these because they are pretty funny because we're web designers and I hear that all the time. And the fold, I'm like, that's ridiculous. I read web design articles. I know it. People scroll. But these are all, clients are saying this for a reason. And these are all opportunities to educate them and to go back and explain why. And I think it's also important if you're getting feedback that seems ridiculous to ask, why am I getting this feedback? And why didn't I explain this? And what have I missed up until this point? The last communication kind of road bump that I found is expectations. This is a quote I sat in Mark Bolton's talk yesterday, and this is one of the things he said. Design is a squiggly, messy line until something good happens or comes out at the end. And I think this is familiar to people who are creative. Like, this is how I feel when I'm trying to do work in general. But the client doesn't really see this. And the client especially didn't see this in the past. But I think now that we're doing responsive design, the client is seeing a lot of messier, more unfinished stuff along the way. This is a really good article by Dan Mall, and there was like a little debate online for a while about this. And the fact that responsive design means that we can't do full page layouts. In the past, it used to be, and even when I started at HappyCog, which is not that long ago, about 3 years ago, we would design like a 960 pixel wide page. We would make it look beautiful. We would put that JPEG in the browser and say, okay, client, this is exactly how your site's going to look. Do you like it? And if they said, yeah, we like it, go ahead. Then we would code it and it would look exactly like that. Now I would say that like maybe 70% of my deliverables don't look like how their website is going to look at all. They might be like pencil sketches or prototypes with no design on it, or it could be a fully thought out graphic design, but it is only for one screen size and there's a whole ton of stuff that they're not seeing. So it's really hard to explain that, and even harder to explain it to a client who isn't a web designer. So when we say this type of menu is going to happen on the phone and this is how the interaction is going to change, it's really hard to visualize that. And it means that we have to be a lot more clear about what they're getting. This is part of that article. It says it's a little conversation between you and the client. Here's a comp of what your site will look like. And the client says, great, but what will it look like on my iPhone? Okay, I'll show you that. And what about my iPad? Will you show me that too? Sure. Will it look good on my boss's BlackBerry and landscape orientation? What about Surface? Retina screens. So there's no way we can design for all of this stuff. And in the next paragraph down here, Dan Mull says, if your client wants to have conversations like this, it likely means that you didn't do a good job of setting expectations. And he goes on to explain that this is something that happens way early in the sales process. It should be like the second you start talking to the client, maybe even before you start talking to the client and they read about your process on your website. It's important to explain this stuff, because if they're expecting a fully perfect website and then they don't get that, I would be very disappointed if I didn't get that and that was something I was expecting. What we do when we deliver work, especially kind of confusing deliverables, so I would say any deliverable that doesn't look like something they're used to is confusing. So like a wireframe, a style board. We've had that recently too, where we delivered a style board. So that's like a ton of different graphic design elements on a page meant to determine the direction of the site, but it's not a page at all. It doesn't have really real content or anything. And our client showed that internally to someone else, and he just thought it was a page because there was they didn't guide him to what he should be looking for and what we want to get out of that. So I just copied and pasted this from our actual delivery client. And we list this wireframe as meant to, like these are the things we're trying to define with this. This wireframe does not have graphic design. We've had clients, like again, this is another thing, it sounds silly to me that you would look at a wireframe and be like, you're an idiot, you thought that was a real graphic design, it's black and white. But they don't know that. And then also things to keep in mind. And on this same, I cut it out because I've already talked about it, but we'll put those questions for, like, this is the type of feedback we want. And these are things you should be asking yourself when viewing this. And this means that if they give it to someone who isn't on our initial call when we're presenting, it's all there grouped together with the deliverable. I kind of equate this to flying. I'm not a super terrified flyer, but I don't love it. And I found that if I'm on a plane with turbulence and the pilot comes on and he sounds really calm and he's like, I've spoken to planes ahead of us and this will only last 5 minutes. Or I was on a plane recently where we flew into storms and then we flew out of storms, but we couldn't land at the airport, so we were flying around for a while. And then we had to land at a different airport and wait to refuel. So not that big of a deal. And he came on every 10 minutes like, hey, we're circling until these storms pass. Hey, we're going to land because we need new fuel. It was fine. But if that had all happened and he didn't come on the loudspeaker and then we landed at an air base, I would have been very concerned. I think a good project manager is pretty essential for this. These are the 4 project managers at our company, and they really, I present about design and I answer questions about design, but they're the ones who really control that and make sure that the clients are understanding what we're doing. Communicating regularly about your work is important. This, you probably can't read it, but it's a weekly status email that the project managers send to every client, and we have a weekly call with them. So even if we are not really actively working, or if we're like heads down coding something and we don't need a whole ton of stuff from the client, we're still talking to them every week. They list how complete different phases are, project issues, risks, and mitigation. So anything that just, even if it's really tiny, that may be raised as like a potential issue in the future, even if it's like so-and-so's going on vacation for 2 weeks, who's going to answer emails for them? That would go there. just so that it's in writing, everyone's on the same page, everyone on their side's getting that, we're all getting it. Upcoming milestones, things that they need to look out for. And I think this helps the client to realize what we're doing, to feel in the loop, gives them the opportunity to ask questions. And this goes both ways. I remember our biz dev guy, I think he spoke to some clients after the fact just to kind of see how the project went and get feedback from them. And I remember hearing that one of our clients, part of the feedback they gave was that we were really tough on them to get us stuff. And that's because we can't do any of our work without any of this. So I think expectations go both ways. The clients aren't only expecting us to deliver things and to do what we say, we're also expecting them to do stuff. And we need to be really clear about what we need before we get started or move forward. And if they don't get us this stuff, then it puts the project on hold and it puts us over schedule, and that's on them. So things like feedback, we're not going to do our next round of design before we hear their thoughts on the last one. Content, more and more recently, we're trying to get this settled way ahead of time. Assets, I can't remember, it was a talk yesterday saying I think it was Mark Bolton also, saying the worst, or kind of the best and worst thing you can do is put fake content and fake assets in someone's site, and nothing gets them going once they see the wrong stuff on their website. And approval. So at the end of a project, there are kind of 3 end goals, and I think if I can look back and say that I've accomplished all of these things, then I'll feel like it's a successful project. The first one is educate. I think every single interaction with a client is an opportunity to teach them, and they teach us a lot about if you need any Ben & Jerry's facts. I know a lot about Ben & Jerry's now, having worked with them, but I would hope that they could also speak about web design, and that we have done our job by explaining this stuff well. There's really, I have, again, one client who's she's an older lady, really not web savvy at all, or even computer savvy whatsoever. And she has started saying stuff, we've been working with her for maybe 6 months. She started saying stuff she'll start giving feedback and then be oh, but that probably wouldn't work on a phone, right? And I'm yeah, it wouldn't really work on a phone. And just the fact that she's thinking about this, it makes me, I feel like a proud mom for this old lady, because it went through to her. And also they're building empathy for what we do. So it makes them a better client and they're able to do more. Build trust. A lot of this comes from those first slides, which I assume we're all doing, which is delivering on time and doing our best work. But I think also communicating and staying open with a client means that they are trusting what we're doing. When things do look a little messy in between, if we have this trust, it makes it a lot less stressful for all of us. It also makes sometimes a lot less work, because if the client doesn't trust us, we probably will have to do 4 different page width comps to show them exactly what it is, and that's going to take forever. But if they trust us, we're able to experiment, we can do new things. I like it as a designer because I like the ability to go off and try new things and not just do exactly what they say and focus on keeping them happy. And the last thing is stay excited. It's really easy I personally feel at the beginning of every project, I'm this is going to be the best project of all time. It's going to go smoothly the whole time. Everyone's going to be so happy. And that never really happens. But I think that if you can launch a website at the end and everyone's excited about it and there's still some excitement that has maintained from the beginning, that's really important. This is an old boss of mine, Kevin Sharon. He used to say, there's no such thing as a bad client. Clients are what you make of them. I do not agree. There is such thing as a bad client. But I think that we often jump to assume that clients are bad just because they're clients. And that's not the case. And we have a lot more power over them, and being able to look at them in a certain way and help them become good clients is important. I went to lunch with 2 coworkers about a week or 2 ago, and we were talking about how we want to be rich and travel the world, and we were having one of those conversations, and one of them made a joke about The Secret, maybe if we just start pretending we're gajillionaires and traveling the world, it'll happen. I've never read this book, but my understanding is that the idea is that you assume something and believe it's going to happen, and then it happens. And it sounds insane, but I think that if you start doing that with clients and kind of like looking for reasons they're not so terrible, instead of looking for things that are hilarious that they say, like future people don't scroll, which is pretty funny, it makes it a lot easier to work with them. This last quote is from actually a client of ours. She wrote a list apart article called Mastering Digital Project Momentum. And what that's about is kind of this excitement that you start a project with and you're moving forward and you want to keep that. And she says, it's easy in a fast-moving agency mode to fall into the mentality of telling tough client war stories because a dynamic of us versus them is easy to relate to. The strongest digital agencies know that they have to be a part of getting to the right answer, not pointing it out and shrugging their shoulders in despair. We're all in this together. Thank you.